They started as they meant to go on. Relentless, merciless, unyielding. No sympathy. No compassion. No respite. I would comply, willingly, unwillingly, broken or not, it didn't matter. I would comply. At the connection I was merely treated like a naughty child, spoken to with the condescending manner one reserves for a simpleton, chastised with supercilious pomposity for failing to do as I was told, for failing to play the game. I soon longed for those simpler times. At Passage House I was spoken to with open contempt and treated with scorn. No longer a naughty child, I was a figure of disgust. Welcome to hell, unofficially sanctioned by the good Christian prelates and patrons of St. Vincent's Church. Less than an hour after my arrival I was presented with their agreement and told to sign. I asked to read it and they asked why. It wasn't necessary. They were busy and didn't have time for this. After some discussion I pointed out it was my legal right, and after being informed I was just being difficult, I was allowed a few minutes to look it over. I circled my concerns and put question marks beside them. Under their conditions I was not allowed to accept paid work, had to agree to apply for housing benefits to pay for their temporary accommodation, and accept whatever housing they deemed to be in my best interests. I was not going to sign without those concerns being addressed. In the discussion that followed I reiterated, as I had dozens of times before, finding employment was my number one priority. I needed to earn an income not only to re-establish my independence, but to begin making payments on the credit card debt I had incurred in Canada during my time in England. I repeated I did not require housing assistance as I could return to my previous residence once I could guarantee payment of rent again, all dependent on finding work. I also asked for a copy of the contract for my own records. I was told my concerns didn't matter. If I didn't sign, I would have to leave the premises immediately. I pointed out I was being forced to sign under the threat of being returned to the streets. This argument had come up at the connection, and I received the same doublespeak in response. They were not threatening me, they were simply telling me the consequences of my actions. They were not forcing me to return to the streets, I simply wouldn't be allowed to stay there. I could look for work, but I couldn't accept it. And I shouldn't be looking for work anyway because of my mental health issues. The sooner I admitted I needed their help, the easier it would be for everyone. The same words, the same brick wall. I was scared. I signed. Over the next few days, I repeatedly asked for answers to the concerns I had expressed and requested my own copy of the contract. They responded with the usual delaying tactics of too busy, and later, before informing me my concerns didn't really matter as I had already signed. I had to abide by their rules, or I would be breaching their agreement and have to leave. 2 work opportunities came up shortly after my arrival, both the result of my testimony written for the performances of Down and Out Live. The editor at the Huffington Post who had commissioned the publication of my work had since taken a new position working for the London-based Metro newspaper. She contacted me on a social media site and requested a meeting. It was during our discussion that I discovered far more interest had been shown in my piece, and more people had wanted to contact me than the single opportunity the connection had arranged. I had simply not had that information passed on to me from the staff, even when I specifically asked. I was disgusted. She wasn't surprised, for she had had experiences with homelessness and their respective charities as a child and knew herself how they operated. She was empathetic to my situation and wanted me to write some pieces, weekly if possible, but she understood the daily stress that homelessness brings and didn't want to add the pressures of deadlines to that. These articles would be published on the Metro's website, and I was free, in fact encouraged, to criticize the charities as I saw fit. We discussed the terms of payment and they were more than reasonable, not enough to get me back on my feet, but a financially healthy first step on that path. I was delighted to accept. The other opportunity had been arranged by the producer of the Down and Out Live production. She recommended me to the Casting Connection, one of many agencies that provide extras to cinematic productions. I had also registered for a course in public speaking at the City of Westminster College shortly after my theatrical debut, and though the course had yet to start, the 2 pursuits would perfectly entwine for further, more regular employment opportunities down the line. The pay was even better than the writing assignments, and I self-effacingly chuckled at the realization that people would pay more for me to stand and say nothing than to unleash my voice on the world. I hadn't told anyone about either of these opportunities, not my friends, not even my partner in crime. I wanted them to be fait accompli before sharing the good news. I quietly began organizing the notes I had been taking and jotting more to lay the foundation stones for future articles. I secretly took myself to St. James Park to take the necessary self-portraits and body measurements for my casting profile. For the first time in months I was hopeful my ordeal was in the early stages of ending. Not just hopeful, excited. Then my caseworker requested a meeting. Somehow, she had found out about the work I had accepted and told me I could not pursue it or I would have to leave. She accused me of being secretive, deceitful, and not keeping them informed of my activities. I responded, obnoxiously, that I had simply been pursuing opportunities as I had been told I could, and two happened to bear fruit. I had to accept them so I could begin earning money to start payments on my debt and return to Canada before my deadline as a permanent resident expired. She told me I needed to get over my obsession with Canada. It wasn't healthy. I was in England now, and had to play by their rules. That particular assertion did not sit well, and the argument grew heated. I shouted this was abuse, that both the Connection and Passage House are abusing the people they help, and I threatened to report them to the police, the government, and the media. I was angry, frightened, and forgot once again the cardinal rule about letting emotions show. The accompanying surge of adrenaline brought my Kirk-inherited tremors into full view, and I began shaking uncontrollably. She picked up on it right away.
You're shaking! Are you on drugs? Get out! Don't come back, just get out!
It was one of the few requests made by any charity with which I was more than happy to comply. I ran out of Passage House in the throes of a full-fledged panic attack. Shaking, sweating, crying, hyperventilating, heart pounding, head swimming, nauseous and close to fainting. I half ran, half staggered through the streets to get as far away as I could, realizing that to any and all passers-by I looked like a junkie caught in a delirium of a bad trip. I tried phoning my partner in crime but was incomprehensible. He told me to meet him at St. James Park. The panic attack had almost burned itself out by the time we met, and he was able to settle my nerves to a more manageable level. I apologized for not only letting my emotions show, but for letting them explode out of control, and not just with charity staff, but with him. He said it was fine. Everyone knew I was sensitive, but the streets would toughen me up. He said it was okay to cry, he often cried himself, but to be careful about letting others see. He assured me any time I needed to blub I could trust him. He stayed true to his word over the coming months and was always available for support whenever the tears needed to flow. In fact, he often encouraged them. He had been having his own difficulties with the charities and, like many homeless veterans, had decided not to make use of their shelters and sleep on the streets, choosing only to sign into the day centers to make use of the showers and lunches while waiting for housing to be provided. As I had been thrown out and told not to return, I was frightened of being back on the streets with no recourse to help. He assured me I could camp out with him, I would be safe under his protection, and we would figure something out together. We spent the rest of the afternoon at Trafalgar Square listening to, and sometimes heckling the buskers with our other comrades in Homeless Arms. I was keen to record the interaction as quickly as possible while it was still fresh in my mind, but had left Passage House empty-handed. One of my other friends rose to the occasion and filched a notepad and pens from the local Ryman's stationery store. I accepted with a conscience as clear as ice. The notepad wasn't particularly to my liking, the cover was a shade of purple I didn't care for.
It's not purple. It's mauve, you ungrateful fuck.
He responded with not entirely mock indignation. But I accepted the ill-gotten implements with genuine appreciation. Beggars can't be choosers, particularly when they don't have the courage to thieve for themselves. That evening I received an apologetic phone call from my caseworker. She was sorry for upsetting me and worried I had left with the wrong impression. I was welcome to return and she asked me to come back that night to talk things over. She had stayed long after her shift had ended because she was worried. She wanted to apologize and make sure I was all right. She sounded sincere, sounded like she was on the verge of crying herself, but I snarlily told her I would think about it and disconnected. After conferring with my friends, I returned. I was taken into a room with my caseworker and one of the voluntary staff. The welcoming smile vanished as the door clicked shut, replaced by an angry glare. I went to sit, and she told me to stay where I was. She declared she had not thrown me out. I had been high on drugs and left violently of my own accord after threatening her. She said she had a witness, the volunteer now standing by her side, sternly nodding. The woman had not been present for the exchange. No one had. The sterile chill of unfiltered fear spread throughout my body. "You're lying," I murmured.
No, I'm not.
She snarled.
You're the liar. Everyone knows you're a liar. And it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to believe you anyway. Because you're homeless.
That was the first moment to break me. No mere crack in the facade, a core part of my psyche simply broke away and shattered on the metaphysical floor beneath us. Mentally, I shut down. Physically, I felt an emptiness expand within me. Emotionally, I felt nothing. For a few brief moments that spanned eternity, I stood there, numb, until a horror unlike any I had ever known took root in the emptiness and spread throughout my entire being. It wasn't just the audacity of the statement, it wasn't just the malice in her eyes, it was the terrifying realization that she was right. She had the power to turn fiction into reality. She had created a scenario that bore no relation to the facts as they had transpired, even produced a corresponding witness that wasn't present at the time, and everyone would believe her. She controlled the narrative. She controlled the paperwork. Her truth would be accepted as the official truth, no matter how false her truth may be. And I was powerless to do anything about it. Because I was homeless. Nobody would believe me. It was the first moment to break me. It wouldn't be the last.